recording?
Oh, and we're not administering the poll, right?
No. Okay. Yeah. There's no students. Okay, the recording is going.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our Travel Tips and Planning info session. I am Haley Spear. I'm an Education Abroad Advisor in the International Studies Office, and I advise students looking to study in Oceania, South Asia, and on at-sea programs.
Hi, I'm Anya Dowell-Wilshire. I'm also an advisor in the Education Abroad office, and I work with what I call the European grab bag programs. So all the little smaller countries that maybe don't have the big enrollments that some of the other ones do. For me, my big ones are going to be Italy, Denmark, Greece, and Germany.
So before we jump in, I just want to express that we are talking about travel during non-COVID conditions. Once travel is able to resume again, we'll be able to speak to best practices, but we're talking about normal times. This will not last forever, and we're excited when travel can resume. So to go over what we'll speak on today, we're going to talk about passports and visas, packing, safety abroad, traveling, your budget, sustainable travel, and reflection.
All right. So one of the first things that you're going to want to do to start preparing to travel, if you do not already have one, is get a passport. So a passport is a legal document. It's the little book thing there that you can see on the screen from the U.S. government or the government of your, country of origin where you're a citizen, indicating that, you're traveling abroad under the aegis of that country. So if you don't already have a passport, that's going to be valid for at least 6 months after your return date from your education abroad program or your other travel. You should begin the renewal process or the application process as soon as possible. This is true under any circumstances, but especially now because due to the pandemic, processing times are a little slower than usual. So in addition to a passport, depending on what country you're going to, what country your passport is from, how long you're going to be abroad, you may or may not also need a visa. So a visa is a document from your host country, so the country that you're traveling to, indicating that you're legally allowed to be in that country for a certain amount of time. So you'll want to do research on what your host country's visa requirements are for study, for travel, whatever it is that you're going to be doing there. So if you need help with this is something that your Education Abroad advisor can give you some guidance on. And we do just want to note that if you're not a U.S. citizen, you should definitely plan to begin this process earlier rather than later. So, regardless of what passport you hold, the process for obtaining a visa can vary really widely depending on what country you're going to, how long you're going to be there, what is your purpose of study. And sometimes you will have to make an in-person appearance to apply for your visa at another country's consulate or embassy in another city or state. Others are going to be available easily and online. Generally speaking, they do cost money, so you're just going to want to do that research and make sure that you have a plan both for your visa application fees, but also for the logistics of how you're actually going to get that visa.
All right, so moving on to discussing packing. It is really important to plan ahead and think about all of these things in advance so you'll be prepared. So first off, talking about plugs and adapters. You need to know if you need an adapter or a converter and what the difference of these two items are. So an adapter simply allows your plugs to fit into a different style outlet, whereas a converter changes the voltage found in an outlet to match that of your devices. Something to note, do not plan to bring a hairdryer because these inevitably combust and are usually very inexpensive to purchase once you're abroad. Medication is something really important to think about. You want to make sure you're bringing an adequate supply to last you for your time abroad. Know what you're taking. Prescriptions that you readily take here in the US may be illegal in other countries. And understand the process of filling a prescription abroad if worse comes to worse. So will you be able to get it? Ensure that when you're traveling, your medications are with you in your carry-on in the event of lost luggage or delays. It's always great to have that in the event of an emergency. In terms of seasons and weather, make sure that you check the average temperatures over the duration of your stay, as well as daily highs and lows. Always bring a rain jacket with you. And something to think about is if you'll have access to shops while you're abroad. So will you have a Target-like store where you can purchase anything that you may have forgotten? If not, you may need to bring everything with you. And in that case, you want to make sure you're not forgetting anything. For example, if you're on a program like Seamaster, where you're living on a 100-foot sailboat and are at sea for days on a time, you'll want to make sure you have everything you need. If you know that you would like to bring back souvenirs, you may even want to consider bringing an empty suitcase with you, or you could buy an inexpensive one while you're abroad to bring home things for friends and family. And a really great rule is if you can't carry it all by yourself, don't bring it. So do a test run. You can walk around the block with all of your luggage. You want to make sure that you can lift your suitcase above your head to put it in the airplane bins. And when you're traveling, less is more.
All right, so we definitely know that, all students and especially, parents and family, other members of your support network always have questions about safety abroad, and this is definitely something really important for you to be aware of. So I do want to start by saying that the overwhelming majority of our students go abroad without having any kind of, health and safety incident, and of the very small number who do have some kind of safety incident, the vast majority of those are going to be kind of crimes of opportunity. So things like pickpocketing, you left your laptop on a cafe table and went in to use the bathroom and your laptop's gone. Community of trust does not extend to abroad. So the number one thing that we want all of our students to be doing is to just practice situational awareness. What that means is just maintaining awareness of your surroundings. So, it's really easy to, be excited about, taking lots of pictures, stuff like that, but don't let yourself get distracted. Use the buddy system and just maintain that awareness of what's going on around you. Also do what you can to blend in. There are certain, clothing styles, brands that can stick out and make you a little bit more of a visual target. In some locations, doing things like flashing around jewelry or an iPhone may make you more of a target. If you're kind of displaying certain levels of wealth, that may not be, the norm where you're going. Other, basic helpful tips that will help you get out of, the vast majority of pickpocketing type situations. Basic stuff like not keeping your phone or wallet in your back pocket. If you're riding crowded public transportation, any public transportation, but especially if it's crowded, zip your purse, keep it under your arm, wear your backpack on your front instead of on your back. Also be aware of distractions, especially in some, higher tourist density areas. So things like, getting mustard thrown on you or just kind of people doing weird stuff suddenly to kind of get your attention away from your personal belongings, because that's when they kind of slide in and grab your wallet or what have you. So like I said, the large majority of incidents that you could potentially be encountering are going to be avoided with that situational awareness. However, in case something does happen in addition to that, or you just run into trouble, it is absolutely essential that you have a working phone while you're abroad. A lot of students are like, it's fine. I'm just gonna, turn my phone off. I don't want to pay for it. I'm just gonna use, WhatsApp or when I'm on Wi-Fi. That's fine. But you do need to make sure that your phone is able to make an emergency call if it is needed. Because what you don't want is to, run into an issue and not be able to access that help that you need in that specific instance. So obviously, that means that you're also going to need to, know what those emergency phone numbers are in your host country. If you have program staff on site, what are their numbers? Also, in some places, it's understanding, what is realistically going to happen if you do call those numbers, because the responses may not be what they would be in the US. So that's the kind of thing that, your program specific orientation should go over. In addition to having those numbers in your phone, I also strongly recommend that you either memorize them or save them someplace other than your phone in case your phone battery dies. So whether that's jotting them down in a notebook or planner that you carry with you, writing them on a card in your wallet, just make sure that you can get those numbers if your phone's dead and you really need help in that moment. So it's also, alongside that, it's really important that you understand the laws of your host country, because when you are abroad, US laws do not apply, and you are going to be subject to the laws of the country that you are in. So a lot of places that can run folks into trouble sometimes are going to be laws around substances, so things like drugs and alcohol. And it's really important that you understand what those laws are, what those legal consequences are before you go, if you plan to use any substances, so that you can make an informed risk-benefit calculation about whether or not it is worth it to you to take on the risk of whatever that may be. And we also want to specifically call out drinking culture, because that, alongside petty theft like pickpocketing, is going to be a big area where students can run into issues. So it's really important that you know not only kind of what the legal laws are around alcohol, but also what those cultural expectations is. So one easy example that comes up a lot in Europe, drinking ages are lower, and alcohol is very present socially, but it's done in a very different context, where sure, there may be wine with dinner every night, or going for an aperitivo with your Italian friends, maybe just kind of like a daily thing. But the idea of drinking to the point where you are publicly intoxicated, noticeably drunk, is simply not done, and is really not going to be viewed favorably by your host culture. So alcohol is also going to make you, or excessive alcohol use is also going to make you a lot more vulnerable to those crimes of opportunity and running into other situations that you are probably not wanting to run into while you're abroad. So this is another great opportunity where you can kind of learn from and engage with your host culture and some different norms than there may be around alcohol use than in the US.
All right, so diving in to talk about traveling, there are many ways that you can explore and travel around your host city or country or region. Buses are an incredibly affordable way to travel in many host countries. So for example, a bus ticket from Greece to Macedonia round trip is 35 euros. You can also think about the various ways of travel and the opportunities it affords you. So a bus will allow you to see the topography of the region, as well as a train. And Rome to Rio is a good resource for transportation options. Another thing to think about is taking local public transportation, as it can also allow you to gain sort of an insight into the local culture that you may not have otherwise. For example, when I was working in Greece to facilitate a study abroad program, I loved to take the public bus to the university I was working at, because you'd see people of all ages packed on these buses, and it was normal everyday life. And that's something that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten to participate in. So thinking about flights, there are multiple ways you can search for flights. Google Flights, kayak.com are all great resources. One trick I use is to clear your cookies to ensure that you're seeing the best rates. And typically booking a flight about 6 weeks in advance will secure you a fair rate. This may not always be possible for planning purposes, but if you do have that flexibility, it's something to consider. And of course, if you wait too long, you will pay a premium. While travel is an exciting and enticing component of study abroad, you should also choose a country and a program because of its location, food, familial customs, and more. So while traveling is something to look forward to, you want to make sure that you also get to know your host city to the degree that you wish. There's always so much more than meets your eye, and you want to find that balance of traveling to neighboring countries or cities, as well as leaving weekends open for, random encounters or going to a local market with your new local friend, and serendipitous things like that.
Okay, so we also want to talk, in addition to those travel tips, about money, because this is something that you're definitely going to want to think about before you go. So the first thing is to just kind of start thinking through what your budget is going to be. Are you someone that wants to be traveling every weekend? Are you someone that plans to stick a little closer to your home city so you don't need to be budgeting for, trains and flights and stuff? But you also need to think about what are your daily costs going to be. Your program should be able to provide you some estimates for this. So go look for that information for things like food, local transit passes, things like that, in addition to, tuition and housing that you are going to have to pay for. So once you are abroad, you're also going to need to make sure that you have a way to access funds. So you need to start doing this by talking to your bank in any credit cards that you have before you go, so that they know you'll be traveling, because your card will be blocked for like fraud, basically. If you suddenly pop up in Korea and you did not tell your bank, and they're like, this charge came out of nowhere, your card is done. As someone who had a travel buddy that had this happen when we were traveling once, it was a real pain. So learn from their mistakes. So you'll need to share your travel plans, and then also discuss withdrawal fees, because pulling money out of your US bank account through an ATM abroad may be getting you like an out-of-network ATM fee, currency conversion fees, stuff like that. So you just need to know what those are so that you can be kind of factoring that into your plans for how you want to be getting money. Also be aware that some credit card companies will charge foreign transaction fees. So again, you just kind of want to know what you're working with that before you go, so that you can be thinking that through. So we do recommend that you try to travel with some cash. You should talk to your US bank and see if you can withdraw any currency from your host country before you go. Most of the time they will maybe need a few weeks or a few days, depending on what currency you need, to process that for you. So talk to them early. But at a minimum, I strongly recommend that everyone have enough money to cover a cab fare in your host country. If your flight's delayed and you miss your, program bus or something like that, just, 50 to 100, the equivalent of 50 to 100 US dollars to just cover some basic unexpected incidentals when you arrive. So we do not really recommend bringing a bunch of US dollars with you and planning to like convert that money at a change counter. That's going to result in much higher fees, usually a less favorable exchange rate. So what we recommend instead is that you use your US debit card to withdraw money from ATMs abroad. Again, you do need to be mindful of like out-of-network ATM transaction fees, things like that, but it is generally speaking, in almost all cases, going to be your most cost-effective way of accessing that money. So we do recommend that you travel with at least 2 forms of accessing funds. So in most cases, this is going to be like a debit card plus a credit card. So if there's an issue with one, you do still have a backup plan, so you're not totally out of luck and stuck there. So in addition to kind of the thought planning that you're going to need to go into in terms of how you're going to get money, you also want to think about how money is going to work in your host location. Is it a cash economy? Is there a tipping culture? Probably not, since that's a pretty unique to the US phenomenon. But you need to kind of know what you're getting into so that you can be aware of, is this someplace where you can, swipe a credit card for, $1 coffee? Or is this someplace where you try to do that and you're going to get glared at and told that you cannot, that transaction cannot be processed? So you just kind of need to know what you're getting yourself into there.
All right. So as Anya mentioned, making a budget is really key, but even more key is sticking to it. Also, public transportation, while it's an authentic way to experience your host city, it's also a very affordable way to do so. So if you plan to take public transportation often, you could look into monthly or quarterly bus passes, research if the city offers student rates and things of that nature. Also, when you're traveling, a lot of cities, especially in Europe, will offer free tours, maybe a free walking tour or even a free food tour. Do some research on the places you're visiting to see what is available. And this can be a great way to meet other travelers. So planning these types of activities at the start of a trip will be a good way to maybe even meet some locals or other travelers. Pay attention to the way locals around you spend. So do they bargain when they're visiting the weekly market, or are prices fixed? What do locals eat and how much per meal do they typically pay? Usually if you spend like a local, your wallet will thank you. And then lastly, really want to avoid overweight bags. These can cost an extra $50 or even $200. And it's really sad when you have to leave half of your belongings or a couple of pounds of your belongings at the airport. So plan. Something really wonderful to have with you is a portable luggage scale. They're really small and lightweight and very easy to bring with you. Also, if you're looking into budget airlines, like for example, Ryanair or EasyJet, some of these airlines even weigh the smaller bag. So this doesn't only apply when you're going to and from your country for the duration of your term abroad, but even weekend trips and things of that nature.
Okay, so one thing that we really are encouraging students to think about is how to travel more sustainably. So this exists in a couple of different kind of areas. Some of it is really kind of nuts and bolts on how to do things like reduce your carbon emissions, because your flight is, airline travel is a pretty significant contributor to carbon emissions. So one easy way to reduce that is to consider direct flights, which are more convenient, but also we know that most of the fuel usage that is burned for planes is during takeoff and landing. So if you reduce the number of connections, you reduce your the amount of fuel that's getting burned. Direct flights are more expensive in many cases, unfortunately. So that is something that you'll need to kind of work out with your own budget, but just do as much as possible, both for your own convenience and also for the environment. Try to consider minimizing the number of connections that you're having to do. This is not really different from in the US, but you should also be planning to bring a reusable water bottle, reusable shopping bag, things like that. Obviously, depending on where you're going, the reusable water bottle may or may not be the best option, depending on what the quality of like tap water is, whether there's places that you can get that refilled, or is it someplace where you're really going to need to rely on bottled water, but it's at least something to think about. I'll also say it's increasingly common in other parts of the world where you will be charged if you need like a shopping bag at the grocery store. It's usually not much, but you should definitely plan to be bringing a reusable bag with you or getting one once you arrive. So in addition to those kind of like obvious things that we kind of know that we should be doing, like, reducing single-use plastics, it's also important to think about what is your impact, what are those interactions with the actual community that you're in. So, if you're staying with a host family or, living in an apartment with other, US university students, what is that impact that you're having on that community? Some of this is kind of clear, like, are you, adhering to local norms for like water and energy consumption, which may be significantly lower than they are in the US. But it's also, are you being a respectful neighbor? Are you, adhering to community standards around, behavior, politeness, things like that. Alongside this, a little bit more on the cultural side, you should not be littering or doing, activities that are going to contribute to degradation of the local kind of environmental climate, regardless of what those local attitudes are. That's part of being, a respectful and sustainable traveler. Some of this also comes down to the choices that you're making and, businesses that you support, souvenirs that you purchase while you're abroad. as much as possible, we want to encourage students to, give your dollars to support local business. If you're getting souvenirs, try to make sure that they're made by local vendors, using those, heritage craftsmanship situations. And then also, like I said, from the community standpoint, it's really important that you be respectful of your host community. So that means learning, basic phrases in your host community language, educating yourself about those local norms, because sustainable travel is not only, reducing water bottle usage, it's also how are you a, respectful and thoughtful and intentional visitor to that community so that you can engage in, thoughtful and sustainable interactions with that culture and community.
So being intentional about your time abroad is incredibly important. So set goals for yourself and your time. Think about what kind of person you want to be while you're abroad. And not only do you want to set goals, but you want to be thinking about how can you add meaning or value to the people of your host community. So we don't only want to take, but also give back. And again, a balance in planning time away and planning time at your host site, but also leaving time unplanned.
All right, that is all we have to share with you today. But as always, Education Abroad advisors are available. If you want to check our website, you can make an appointment with us under the Make an Advising Appointment tab. We are all very veteran travelers, and we have a lot of tips, both in terms of like bigger picture stuff, like what we talked about today, but we also, advise by region. So we are great resources if you are wanting to, learn more about how a certain thing works in a specific host country, or, even just want like some tips for the best place to get a sandwich in Florence, Italy. Like, I'm your girl. So definitely do not hesitate to reach out to us. We're here as a resource for you. And we hope that we will hear from you soon.